thunderstorm in Alaska starts a fire that creates its own weather, driving the conflagration to awesome proportions. And a typhoon that raged during World War II inspires the most advanced weather prediction system in the world. Powerful storms, and the people who survive them, coming up on Storm Warning. In the vast Alaska wilderness, north of Anchorage, small planes are a common means of transportation. And in the summer, pilots are always on the lookout for smoke in the forest. Because when thunderstorms build here, lightning can strike. Scores of fires are started this way each year.
In the summertime, you always have reports of fires in Alaska. You can't predict it, not 100%. You can't tell.
Jennifer Booty is an Alaska veteran. She lives with her husband and son at their homestead outside Anchorage, where a small runway is the quickest way out. This is an area where suburbs dwindle into wilderness called Miller's Reach.
It was really dry. One day I thought I'd take a walk in the woods, and Martin and I went out, and I turned around because it was creepy. The moss was crunchy.
Crunchy like kindling, and soon it begins to burn. With the help of the weather, this fire will feed on itself until it's a runaway conflagration.
Smoke jumpers, fire call, LO report to dispatch.
A smoke jumping team goes on red alert. Operation Manager Tom Boatner is concerned about fire reports.
If a big fire is burning really hot and heavy fuels, brush or timber, generally either the weather's driving the fire or the fire actually begins to drive the weather.
The potential for disaster is rising with the smoke. Water, released from the burning earth, goes up into the superheated air. Moisture at higher altitudes then condenses on the smoke particles and ash. Pyro is the Latin word for fire, and pyrocumulous, or fire clouds, are billowing over Miller's Reach.
What you end up with is a big, huge column of boiling smoke with big, white, towering cumulus right on the top of it. And it'll start spitting out lightning right over your fire.
Soon, people in the surrounding towns are facing a frightening sight.
Look at where it is. We just gonna jump that road. None of us can.
We need immediate evacuation. Our fire is out of control and it's coming this way.
Smoke is coming in as hot and you won't survive the heat.
Can we drive out?
If you hurry, you can drive out, but
We
you
have
gotta get
boats.
going.
Should we go on a boat?
No, if you can drive out, let's get out now. You can't survive the heat on the lake if it comes through here.
Yeah, the fire just overran our position on South Beaver Lake.
Victor Barbe is one of hundreds of firefighters responding to the call.
I think the Miller's Reach fire, we knew that they didn't have it under control. It was creating its own weather pattern.
Dinner will be ready in just a little bit.
Out at the Booty homestead, no one is aware of the gathering firestorm.
We were starting to cook dinner, and my son wanted to go outside, so he banged on the door. That's when I saw the smoke. And it was huge. It was this huge plume of smoke about a mile away, heading straight for our house. And I thought, this is it. We've lost everything.
Lee checks their small plane in case a quick escape is needed. Jennifer begins to videotape the most destructive wildfire Alaska has ever seen. At fire headquarters, Tom Boatner makes sure the smoke jumpers' planes are ready for takeoff. Rob Allen is part of the team on call. He knows this will be a bad one.
The number one thing we knew we were starting off with was instead of just being resources that were burning up, the Miller's Reach fire was burning right in town.
The smoke jumpers are resolved to do what they can for residents.
When we jump a fire, we'll circle the fire a couple of times, get an idea of what it looks like, where it's heading to. Then we'll pick a good spot somewhere near the tail. That way the fire is burning away from us when we get on the ground. We had a runway that we were going to use as a drop zone with a lot of good open areas around that we could get into.
It's the Booty family's runway. Jennifer videotapes the smoke jumpers as they land. Rob Allen hits the ground running toward the Booty's home.
Once we get to the ground of the Miller's Reach fire, we knew right away that we were going to try and do something with the one house that was right there at the runway.
The smoke jumpers set to work, one of scores of firefighting teams now trying to cope with the Miller's Reach blaze. In another part of the forest, Victor Barbe's crew has arrived at the fire line.
We got out there and the fire had already raced almost a mile off the road, and there was no way we could reach it with any kind of hose lines or anything. We needed air tanker support.
Their efforts are soon joined by heli-tac choppers. Air support drops huge plumes of water and flame retardant ahead of the inferno. But just as there's a chance the fire might be contained, the weather begins to conspire with the fire again. This time, it's a windstorm from a nearby mountain range.
The winds were coming right off the Alaska range and just basically coming right downhill. The wind was really pushing the fire, and we basically had a wall of fire right behind us coming towards us.
Victor Barbe and his unit are struggling with the leading edge of the blaze as the firestorm causes the wind speed to double.
We had winds roughly 60 miles an hour, and to try to stand in it and fight the fire, there was no way.
Let's get out of here.
We knew that we couldn't stop it by ourselves, and we had to back out.
When we come back, the fire crew encounters a wall of flames. In the forest outside of Anchorage, Alaska, where civilization trails off into wilderness, the firestorm is consuming acreage with alarming speed. Hundreds of homes in the forest have already been destroyed, and hundreds more are in the fire's path. The weather is fanning it like a blowtorch, to the operation chief's dismay.
That fire raged out of control once it got away from us because the pyrocumulus clouds directly over a big hot wildfire that's beginning to generate its own weather will begin to put down downdrafts of wind, which can really increase your winds tremendously around the perimeter of your fire. If that first wind hadn't blown so hard for 2 or 3 days, we would have caught that fire when it was much smaller. But the wind just made it beyond our capability to catch it and hold it.
As thousands of acres of forest and surrounding small towns burn, 1,400 firefighters from all over the American Northwest descend upon Miller's Reach. And as the fire spreads, so does the evacuation effort.
If we can, we'd like to get a roadblock, fires crossing Big Lake Road at Kenlock.
Most people evacuate, but a handful of hardy homesteaders is still trying to take on the flames themselves. Lee Booty clears combustible brush away from his home.
I was running my dozer and doing everything I could. If I hadn't had anything to do, it would have been a little tough to stand around and watch.
The smoke jumpers that landed on the runway at the Booty homestead have their hands full.
You know, the smoke jumpers, of course, knew exactly where they could influence and where they couldn't. They'd know when to step in and fight, and then when to just back off and let it do its thing, because there was no way to stop it.
In another part of the forest, firefighter Victor Barbe drives his unit's fire truck at breakneck speed.
It was almost like we entered into a tropical storm, is how fast the winds were. And there was ashes, embers, everything flying everywhere. All I heard was the crackling of trees exploding. I was scared to death. I really was. I've run into many structure fires where the house itself is on fire and it didn't bother me. But when you're driving down a road and there's literally fire all around, it scared me real bad.
Victor finally manages to clear the flames. He's gotten his team out of the wood.
We better get the hell out of here.
The operation chief is getting reports of too many close calls.
It's the only wildfire I've been on in 22 years as a firefighter where I honestly believed that somebody was going to die in the first 2 or 3 days on the fire. First night the fire blew up, it rolled about 4 or 5 miles in about 4 or 5 hours.
And now the Booty homestead is surrounded.
At some point about midnight, the wind shifted. It changed 180 degrees and it started blowing directly toward us. I remember hearing the crackling noise, and I could see this boiling red and black swirling stuff out there.
It was pretty clear that the house was starting on fire. The flames were licking out of the roof of it. Right at that moment, one of those smoke jumpers had waltzed right over there and just given it a nice shot with that hose.
The guys were just hosing everything down as fast as they could. Just by sheer will, the guys hung it out there. At one point, they basically had their backs against the wall of the house and the hoses pointed outwards and were just spraying everything down. It was pretty touchy as we were going down the road. You could really hear the fire behind us. We were a little pumped up from knowing that our access way back, the way we'd come, was about to be covered in flame. And as the wind was pushing over and heating everything up with the warm air, I looked up at one point and there was just a wall of flame going across the road.
You know we're going to be in a tunnel here pretty soon?
I thought for sure all the houses down there were probably going to end up being burned up. We spent the rest of that evening where the fire burned at us from about 4 different directions as the wind changed and the fire just started doing its own thing.
The standoff continues until morning, when Lee Booty tapes a sight he'd never expected.
As you can see, the house is still here, but you can tell it's pretty much the end of the world going on there yet.
The exhausted smoke jumping team must trudge on and follow the blaze.
The fact that the weather just never gave us a break, it never died down, it just kept blowing and blowing for days.
But on the 7th day, the fire's roar is replaced with a gentler sound. The weather finally plays fair. The smoke clears, revealing the charred aftermath of the most destructive firestorm Alaska has ever seen. It was one of the top 10 worst forest fires in American history.
It's the first fire Alaska's dealt with where so much property, so many homes were burned down, and sort of out of nowhere I just broke down crying, and I sort of had to pull myself together and get back to work, and nobody died, and that's really the most important thing.
I didn't know that something like that could cause that kind of damage or those kind of storms. That's what it was. It was just a big firestorm. There was about 11 firefighters that lost their houses during that fire, and they didn't even once stop, even though they knew that their house was on fire.
400 homes are destroyed. The Booties can't believe they have anything left.
I'm still really amazed. And the smoke jumpers said they couldn't have held it any longer, not even 60 more seconds. It felt like Christmas afterwards that it was still there.
There was no real reason that that house should still be standing. It was completely black all the way around it, and everything in that area that was immediately adjacent to the house burned up.
The Booties will spend months cleaning up from this wind-driven conflagration. They're still determined to make a life in the wilderness, but they will never look at weather the same way.
We thought we were in the most boring place in Alaska. There we are in the middle of a huge weather phenomenon.
When we come back, how a typhoon caused casualties in World War II and sent one man on a lifelong mission.
Stronger as it moved to the west, but there was...
From a sailor crossing an ocean single-handedly to a whaler rounding the Horn on a clipper ship, seafarers have always been at the mercy of storms at sea. Even modern naval strategy can be threatened when the ocean turns angry. For instance, jets taking off the deck of an aircraft carrier must have a stable runway for high-speed takeoffs and landings. Successfully completing a mission means steering clear of serious storms.
If the weather is forecast to be horrible, then it's up to the commander to decide whether he wants to go ahead with it or not. If the operation fails because of bad weather, he gets criticized for it.
Leo Clark has helped the U.S. Navy take the lead in predicting maritime weather since World War II, when some of the worst losses of men and machines were caused not by bombs or bullets, but by storms.
During World War II, observations were always taken by hand. There weren't a lot of sophisticated instruments. You just had the old human eyeball.
Clark forecast for a unit chasing German U-boats in the stormy North Atlantic.
You observed the motion of clouds. You had only a few radiosondes, which are balloon-borne instruments that measure the temperature of the atmosphere and the humidity.
You had very little. You had the direction of the action in the water. You had a few stations around that would be reporting, and you'd have to extrapolate quite a ways just to know where the storm center might be located.
James Black is another World War II veteran who did meteorological work. He was stationed aboard a supply ship in the South Pacific.
I was doing weather observations, weather reporting, and also forecasting.
Black's ship was on the way to resupply Admiral William Halsey's fleet, a critical line of defense against Japanese forces in the Pacific. Halsey's ships have just won the battle for Leyte Gulf in the Philippines, but they're dangerously low on fuel and supplies. As Black's ship approaches the rendezvous point, he uses a time-worn mariner's technique to read the signs of a brewing storm.
The signs that we saw was the difference in the direction of the swell and the direction of the waves.
When we come back, the typhoon that raged during World War II inspires the most advanced weather prediction system in the world.
We thought that we were really in for trouble, and the ship started to make preparations for heavy weather.
In the midst of the resupply, Typhoon Cobra pounds down on the fleet with relentless force. These cyclonic storms, called hurricanes in the Atlantic, are usually larger and more powerful in the Pacific, where they're called typhoons. Winds shriek at more than 135 miles per hour. Some waves are taller than a 7-story building.
In my lifetime, the largest waves I've ever seen was in that particular storm. You're riding up, and it seems like you'll never reach the top, and when you start down the other side, there's a long way down.
Planes are torn from decks by high winds and waves. Metal hulls are ripped apart. Destroyers waiting for refueling are particularly vulnerable. 3 destroyers capsize and sink with everyone aboard. Leo Clark will never forget hearing that nearly 800 men drowned in the storm.
We could just sympathize with the people. I knew how difficult it was to forecast over the oceans. Being hit by a hurricane and losing so many ships was a prime reminder that typhoons are not to be monkeyed with. You adjust your tracks, you slow down, or you even turn around and run. You avoid typhoons, period.
Today, the chance of a U.S. warship sailing into a cyclone is almost zero, because this Navy veteran helped create one of the most aggressive prediction systems in the world.
It weakened, and then it started to become stronger as it moved to the west. But
It's the Navy Operational Global Atmospheric Prediction System, or NOGAPS. Weather data like wind speed, air pressure, and water temperature is measured around the globe and transmitted via radio and satellite.
It takes about 3 hours for us to collect enough information worldwide so that we can start a numerical forecast of the atmosphere.
Supercomputers take the complex factors that make up the Earth's atmosphere and reduce them to numbers. The numbers become a model.
This is a model of the physics of the atmosphere. The motion of the atmosphere, what we call the diabatic effects, in other words, things like rain, fog, winds, and turbulence, and all that were included in the model. We're finding out that the atmosphere is chaotic. We forecast the same thing 8, 16, 32 times, over and over again. And you sort of make a statistical analysis. The chances of rain here are 95%, or no rain here is 30%.
The result is a valid 10-day weather forecast. The NOGAP system was battle-tested successfully in the Persian Gulf War. But it's not infallible. The Earth's climate is too complex.
Given the best forecast and the best analysis, we probably can't forecast beyond 14 days. That's because of what we call the butterfly effect. If a butterfly flaps its wings down in Australia, it's going to rain in New Jersey. And we can't keep track of the butterflies.
But Leo Clark's life's work has led to a vast improvement over old nautical forecasting methods. Now, neither the solitary sailor nor the military strategist need ever lose a battle with a typhoon again.